Much like the Githyanki, the Scro arose out of the ashes of violence and ruin to become a formidable threat. They were also the brainchild of a charismatic leader, who clearly saw the innate problems orcs would always face in trying to defeat elves, unless those problems could be removed from their race by any means. The orcs simply would never gain a true upper hand in their ageless conflict. The violence and ruin that saw the birth of the Scro is now commonly known as the Unhuman War. This was when a very formidable elven imperial fleet set out to wipe out the races of the goblinoids, the orcs, the kobolds, and the ogres, an extermination. Multiple attempted genocides, really. They called the Great Hunt. For a decade, the elves embarked on wholesale slaughter, taking vengeance for centuries of their populations being attacked by wave after wave of unhuman raiders and invaders. For the shorter-lived races, these conflicts took place generations ago, most of the time, so from their perspective the elves just went super violent, and it was all they could do to stop the elven fleets from wiping out their populations entirely. For the orcs, they had been exploring the multiverse in spelljammer type ships powered by their shamans for thousands of years. They were very widespread, as were the other unhuman races. But they were not organised. They never really had been, fighting among themselves even more than they fought the elves, the dwarves, and the humans. The elven fleet was highly organised and absolutely devastating, to the point that the elves developed biological weapons that could wipe out all life on a planet, potentially. The history of the first Unhuman War is well documented in the Forgotten Realms wiki pages, so I'll just paraphrase what's written there as per usual. The Great Hunt began with the Battle of Kuul, a huge battle fought in greyspace starting in 965 using the Forgotten Realms Dale Reckoning calendar, as I do on all my D&D videos to save on confusion. Kuul set the tone for the entire war, as a massive fleet of elven vessels attacked suddenly and left their enemies scattered and broken. These types of aggressive actions lasted for nearly a decade and wiped out about half of the orcish fleet. The elven fleet managed to wipe out all production of the kobold angel ships, the goblin porcupines, which once numbered in the thousands, the orc scorpion ships, the massive ogre mammoth ships. Few of these classes of ships survived the war. The elven forces chased down all fleeing enemies as they sought to hide from the elves among the surface-dwelling relatives, but the elven fleet adopted the practice of bombarding the surface from orbit, something that wizards and the high-level clerics got very pissed off about, so the elven fleet suddenly had to answer directly to some divine avatars who appeared out of nowhere, and they retreated, becoming much more restrained and limiting their attacks to only ground-based offensives. The only noteworthy goblinoid victory in the war was achieved by the combined goblin fleet under the command of the half-orc Grelnak Longtooth. An unprecedented display of organisation and actual unification of the goblinoid forces, the goblinoid fleet dealt the first and only truly damaging blow to the elven fleet by employing guerrilla tactics in wildspace system filled with small moonlets that could be used to hide ships and prepare ambushes. The combined goblin fleet managed to continue fighting for years, despite the elves' constant escalation as they kept marshalling forces to crush Grelnak's remaining beleaguered ships. Realising that Grelnak's fleet was diverting too many elven forces from the larger warfare effort, and that a proper strategy to defeat them would take too long, Eldon Leafblower, the commander of the elven fleet at the time, met with Grelnak and offered an armistice. The half-orc, knowing that his fleet's defeat was only a matter of time, agreed to cease the hostilities with the condition that his followers were given a world where they could thrive undisturbed by elven interference. The Elven Council of Admirals then reluctantly agreed to concede the world of Armistice in winter space, the most inhospitable planet they could find, to Grelnak's people. In the late stages of the war, around 981 DR, the Elven forces developed a method of destroying entire planets. The only known instance in which this power was used was on the small world of Borka in greyspace. Then a stronghold of orcs, goblinoids, and other races. It was completely destroyed by the elves. The exact method was unknown, but it combined exceptional amounts of arcane magic and the direct assistance of the Seldarine pantheon of the elves. As far as anyone is documented, this was the only instance this power was ever fully unleashed, as that elven fleet, located in greyspace, was completely wiped out by a series of catastrophic accidents and furious reprisal attacks by many other surviving fleets. This was the era that the elves were creating arcane and divine mechanoid power suits. There was the breeding of hulking super monsters and spawning nightmare-eating machine offspring, and so on. It was a very anime time in the multiverse. Those massive abomination beasts were known as witchlight marauders, and although most were destroyed before they could be employed by the orc shaman creators, there are still a few hidden away, dormant for centuries. An absolute nightmare if you ever get hold of one. The creation and weaponization of mutated life forms was practiced by both sides of the conflict. On the elven side, voluntary elves and humans were mutated into bionoids, shape-shifting creatures that could turn into powerful insect-like warriors. The other creatures created by the elves included the Voltron-like spirit warriors. On the unhuman side, orcish shamans created the Yitsan, which, while mutated hobgoblin shamans gave rise to the Chak-Chak. Let me know in the comment section below if you want to hear more about these ancient war machines and mutant horrors. I'm going to assume that you do, because why wouldn't you? In the following centuries, a group of orc survivors of the Great Hunt settled in a distant wildspace, and under the leadership of Dukaksh developed in this highly advanced culture and civilization known as the Scro. They were disciplined and organized and all united in their burning hatred of elves. Scro are called Space Orcs by many, but let me stop you there. This is a distinct subspecies, quite different from any orcs you will find in the Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk. They are larger, averaging 6 feet, with some reaching 8 feet tall. They have the facial structure of what someone from the Forgotten Realms would call a northern orc, those native to the spine of the world mountains and often called many arrows orcs lately. The Scro have a distinctly porcine snout, but also less jutting and higher set foreheads with a strong jawline. They also tend not to hunch over like other orcs, and their eyes tend to glow with a faint green light in the darkness. Combined with the style of armor and gear they wear, plus their long polished and decorated tusks, make them look very intimidating, which is exactly what they are really. Scro skin color varies, ranging from dark orange to jet black, with the occasional green or even stark white. They're almost always wearing black leather armor encrusted with multicolored metal spikes. They're so fond of metal spikes that they also keep their tusks sharp by filing them to points, and they decorate their body with small totems related to their tribes and their space vessels. They also keep a tooth necklace called a torag, featuring the teeth pulled from defeated enemies. Torag form the bulk of Scro cultural artifacts, along with legendary weapons used by revered ancestors. The practice of going about fully armored most of the time, and the fact that the Scro often coat their colorful spikes with poison, is another reason you literally don't want to bump shoulders with one of them. Their armor, be it light leather and spike studs or even chain or splint mail, is always meticulously well cared for. Their weapons are well made and kept in top condition. The first sight of a squad of Scro departing a ship at a spelljamming port is an impressive one. They walk upright and proud. They often wear billowing blue cloaks, and their superheroic level of muscle conditioning from a lifetime of daily training is very obvious, even under layers of expertly crafted and decorated glossy black armor with their own array of different size, style and color of metal spikes, as distinct as fingerprints. Yet together they seem very much like the highly disciplined and yet brutal warriors that they are. Scro are the deliberate result of some pretty serious cultural and physical manipulation by one of the most famous charismatic leaders that their race has ever produced. They differ from other orcs, much like the Uruk-hai differ from regular mortal orcs in the Lord of the Ring. They are larger, and Scro less than 6 feet in height are unlikely to ever mate with another Scro. They would have to seek a family outside of their own culture, which sounds harsh, but they also agree with this and would probably not mate with a smaller partner outside of another culture either. So Scro have nothing but scorn for smaller, weaker humanoids. It's drummed into them from birth that they must be the strongest and smartest race to survive and dominate, as Gruumsh commands of them. To the Scro, they think of themselves as humans in Warhammer 40k see as the Astartes, the genetically and surgically modified superhuman space marines, and fanatics in the cult of the immortal god Emperor. The Scro also believe that they exist to fight for the orcish species, to exterminate the elves and take control of the multiverse, restricting other races to only living on the planets where they exist now, and stopping all exploration and expansion of other species while establishing orc enclaves and transforming new worlds for the orcs to thrive on. The original homeworld of the Scro is called Dukaksh, or that star system is called Dukaksh. They have a god of that same name, which may or may not be an aspect of Gruumsh. Most of the spine of the world orcs from the Forgotten Realms come from a world called Adzadar. However, so Dukaksh is just one of many star systems which are home to an abundant orc population. In truth, Dukash is the name of the charismatic leader, the war leader that rescued their population from extermination and established a new, comprehensive doctrine of behavior, even renaming their race as the Scro. He led his fleet to a remote world, and on that world the Scro were divided up into 24 tribes and scattered in well-planned cities with numbers ranging between 10 and 100,000 Scro per population centre. These cities are entirely practical, more like military bases run to service training facilities, shipyards, command towers and supply fortresses. Everything is stark, there is no gardens, but it's very clean and well signposted. This is one of the few planets a Scro really feels comfortable walking around on the surface. Most Scro prefer to live life on board a spelljammer, off planet somewhere, snugly operating in the rigid hierarchy of their culture, handed down to them by their almighty leader, and Dukash, the Scro father god. There is a pretty clear template for depicting Scro culture and mannerisms, and that is the Klingons from Star Trek. Except they prefer to just close in, slam their ship into a target, board as many highly trained warriors as they can, and overwhelm any resistance with brutal hand-to-hand combat, hand axes, clubs, and muzzle-loading firearms. Scro warriors are trained martial artists who can punch, kick, flip, throw, and even make best use of their natural bite attack. Their martial arts style is most similar to that of the combat pistol shooting, except it works with either a long muzzle loader with a blade attachment, or a hand axe is also good for throwing at short range and with a lot of force behind it. The Scro are strong believers of stopping power, and love nothing more than marching over the blown back bodies of their shredded enemies. If you give Scro a minigun, they would actually cry happy. But then they feel the same way about flamethrowers and warlocks who are on the team. So Scro arcane and divine arts are almost one and the same. Their shamanic traditions have been so focused on powering and piloting spelljammer warships, creating super weapons and massive engineering projects on a military scale, that they are no longer druid based, but rather war priests and mystic theurges able to cast both divine and arcane magic at a very high level and at great personal risk, much like the warcasters of the hobgoblin armies. There really is not much by way of tourist attractions on the planet Dukash. The shipyards are impressive, I guess. Oh, and the tomb of the almighty leader. At the end of his life, Dukash declared his people be called the Scro, and commanded that all Scro should learn the elven language so that one day they could explain to the elves in their own tongue exactly who their conquerors are. Dukash was placed in a tomb magically set to hover directly over the Scro planet's north pole so that Dukash could watch over his people in his death. The planet was named after their almighty leader, and he gained enough worshippers to attain godhood over them, though nowhere near as powerful as Grumsh, of course. Activity on the planet became fever-pitched as the entire populace began preparing for the Second Unhuman War. In earnest, well, they called it the War of Revenge, but it's mostly called the Second Unhuman War these days. The Scro introduced new types of warships called the battle wagons. They also worked with other species as long as they shared. The objective was to annihilate all elven ships and colonies, with a secondary goal of gaining military control of all star systems. The war first entered realmspace in 1360 DR, shortly after the Grand Army of the Tweegan invaded all of Faerun. It took over 12 battles in wildspace for the Elven Imperial Navy, reinforced by spelljammers from Evermeet, to drive the Scro out of realmspace and back into the Astral Sea, leaving behind a victorious but crippled Elven fleet. After the end of the war, some of the surviving Scro in realmspace were captured by Illithids from the planet Glyph, or the beholders of planet Hikatha. The other survivors were attacked by the human fleets from Wa and Shaolung in the lands of Karatur. Still other Scro avoided capture and took to hiding in the moons of Garden. Despite the fact that the elves continuously searched for the remaining Scro in realmspace, at least one plucky small Scro fleet still existed as late as 1368 DR. This fleet did not attack the elves, but instead tried to profit from trade on Toril by selling firearms to contacts in Waterdeep and other cities. The fleet withdrew from Toril after a short time, however, and its whereabouts thereafter are currently unknown. It has been quite a while, though. Meeting an individual Scro who has grown up living on Toril, they're not your garden variety orc, more like an orog in stature, but tall and athletic like a Goliath. The Scro takes pride in its appearance. Their hair is tied back in braids, shaved down the sides. They have a natural penchant for wearing leather armor like motorbike hooligans and displaying their wealth in flashy gem-studded embellishments. Scro can read and write. They speak Orcish, Elvish, and the common tongue. Scro Orcish is more complex than common Orcish, about 3 times the vocabulary. So orcs from the many arrows tribes would have trouble following everything a Scro says, but a Scro would be able to understand them perfectly. Scro live communally not just because they're very insular and don't trust other races, they're also very fertile. Like most kinds of orcs, female Scro give birth to litters of 2 to 5 infants at a time. Most of them survive to adulthood, being raised in community creches. Scro are usually named after famous heroes of their people. Most of these heroes are males, so the Scro females often have male names that are turned into female names. Scro live longer than most other kinds of orcs. Most live to 80 years if they don't die in combat, and some are known to live for up to 94 years. One of the most famous Scro on the planet Toril was Thurgod, leader of the Blood Axe Smashers, aka the Smashers, a Zentalar band of marauders and murderers who operated out of Darkholds during the reign of King Azaun Oberskyer IV of Cormyr around 1369 DR. There was a 2,000 gold coin bounty for any who could destroy Thurgod's band of 3 hill giants and 16 ogres. Thurgod was known to be rather ill-mannered, although he inspired great confidence in his troops and had a good sense of tactics. He was prone to planning ambushes against his opponents. He originally crash-landed his spelljammer vessel on Toril near Darkhold in 1355 DR, and can be encountered in the campaign book for the Ruins of Zhentil Keep, published originally by TSR. Thurgold was a classic lawful evil villain. The Scro lean heavily towards that alignment in their own culture. They probably fall into the worship of Bane pretty comfortably, and would have no issues dealing with the fiends of the Nine Hells. They won't deal with the Drow, though, or any elf for that matter, unless raised outside of Scro culture. This prejudice is deeply ingrained in them in all aspects of their own culture. I'm not sure yet if they exist in 5th edition or any edition for that matter, but somewhere out there just has to be a gang of space bikers with spined leather armor, some sort of space rocket bike and grapple hooks on chains wrapped around their limbs, and they could use to grapple, bind and shred their victims at close range. An orc lobo, baby. Of course, as intelligent, widely travelled and highly capable orcs, Scro can be of any alignment or personality type that you choose if you happen to be playing one as your character. They sound like a lot of fun to me, except perhaps for the tendency to murder elves whenever they can get away with it. Oh well. I'm sure those Scro with traditional family values. Thanks for listening. My name is AJ Pickett and I make videos about role-playing game lore. That's all I have for you right now, but I'll be back with more for you very soon. I do like the fact that the Scro operates spelljamming vessels using shamans and not spelljamming helms as per usual. Although they could use the traditional arcane ways, I like the fact that, much like in Star Trek, when a Star Trek member goes on board the Scro ship operates by a shaman. So the faith of the spiritual faith of the crew is integral to the operation of the ship. So, yeah, emotions run high on a Scro ship, but it's tightly controlled by their discipline. So, yeah, I really like that. That the ravening savages that are held in check by this rigid adherence to a doctrine of their long dead god emperor.